At 9:42 a.m., September 15, 1944, a single bullet screamed through the superheated Pacific air and punched through the skull of a Japanese general standing 800 yards away. The officer collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. His binoculars clattered onto white coral. His map case fell open. And in that instant, 47 Japanese soldiers who had sworn to die for their emperor threw down their weapons and raised a white flag. The man who pulled the trigger was not a legendary marksman. He was not a grizzled veteran. He was Tommy Reeves, a 20-year-old college dropout from Hickory Corners, Michigan, who had been mocked just hours earlier for carrying what his sergeant called a mail-order toy, a fragile glass pipe that had no business in war. That toy would kill more enemy officers in 6 weeks than an entire infantry company. It would stop tank assaults. It would change how America fought wars. But on that morning, when Tommy first pulled it from its moldy canvas case, his fellow Marines laughed at him and told him to pick up a real rifle before he got himself killed. The problem on Peleliu was brutally simple. Japanese officers were conducting an orchestra of death from positions the American infantry could not touch. They stood on limestone ridges 600, 700, 800 yards away, completely safe from the M1 Garand rifles that equipped every Marine rifleman. The Garand was a magnificent weapon, semi-automatic, reliable, capable of putting 8 rounds downrange as fast as a man could pull the trigger. But it had a fatal limitation. Beyond 500 yards, the iron sights covered up the entire target, and the bullet began to tumble and drift. The Japanese had done the math. They knew exactly where American rifle fire ended and their immunity began. So they stood in the open, directing mortar teams with hand signals, adjusting machine gun fire, coordinating counterattacks. They were untouchable ghosts, conducting a symphony of American deaths. On September 14th alone, 73 Marines died from accurately directed indirect fire. Officers called for naval gunfire support, but the shells took too long to arrive and wasted too much ammunition on empty caves. They called for airstrikes, but the Japanese simply disappeared into tunnels until the planes left. They needed something immediate, something precise, something that could reach out and silence those officers before they killed more Americans. But nothing in the Marine Corps inventory could bridge that gap. The standard doctrine was to accept the casualties and push forward. Math was math. Physics was physics. 500 yards was the limit, and men died because of it. Tommy Reeves had grown up calculating trajectories. His father, George Reeves, was a First World War veteran who had carried a Springfield 1903 through the trenches of France. George had survived by understanding that war was fundamentally a math problem disguised as chaos. He taught his son to hunt white-tailed deer in the Michigan woods using mental arithmetic. Wind speed times distance divided by bullet velocity equals drift. Gravity constant times time of flight squared equals drop. Tommy could do the calculations in his head faster than most men could work a slide rule. When his father was killed by a Japanese sniper on Guadalcanal in 1942, Tommy enlisted the next day. He was 18 years old. He brought with him his father's rifle and something else, a catalog advertisement for a Unertl 8-power target scope that his father had circled in pencil with a note scrawled in the margin. "Imagine what you could do with glass, Tommy." The scope cost $88, nearly 2 months of a private's pay. It was a massive steel tube, 24 inches long, mounted on delicate aluminum rings that looked like they belonged in a laboratory, not a battlefield. The Marine Corps armorer laughed when Tommy requested permission to mount it. "Son, that thing'll fog up in 5 minutes in the Pacific humidity. It will shatter the first time you bump it against a rock. And even if it works, you will be too slow with a bolt-action rifle." The enemy fires 8 rounds, while you fire 1. Just use your Garand like everyone else. But Tommy knew something the armorer did not. Speed meant nothing if you could not hit the target. And hitting a target at 800 yards required seeing the target first. He paid for the scope with his own money. He mounted it himself in the barracks at night, using a borrowed screwdriver and a level stolen from the engineering company. He zeroed it on a makeshift range behind the mess hall, shooting at paint cans at 100, 200, 300 yards. The other Marines gathered to watch, and the mockery came fast and cruel. Look at the college boy with his telescope. You planning to study the stars, Reeves? That glass tube will get you killed. War is not a science project, kid. Put the toy away. Sergeant Frank Harding was the loudest critic. He called the rifle a circus act. He said precision instruments had no place in the mud and chaos of island warfare. He told Tommy that when the Japanese overran their position in a banzai charge, that fancy scope would not stop a bayonet. Tommy said nothing. He just kept calculating, kept adjusting, kept practicing. He filled a notebook with numbers, elevation adjustments for every 100 yards, from 100 to 1,000. Wind corrections for crosswinds from 5 to 20 miles per hour. Temperature effects on air density. Humidity impacts on bullet trajectory. He turned warfare into pure mathematics. The first test came on September 15, 1944, exactly as described in the opening. The Japanese officer on the ridge at 800 yards. The mockery from Sergeant Harding. The careful preparation. Tommy wrote the numbers on his forearm. 800 yards, plus 28 clicks elevation. Right 4 clicks, windage. He lay behind the rifle and looked through the glass tube. The 8-power magnification erased distance. Suddenly, the officer was right there. Tommy could see the buttons on his tunic, the sweat on his forehead, the arrogant smirk that said he was safe. Tommy adjusted the knobs. Click, click, click. The crosshairs moved. He took a breath, let half of it out, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked. The scope slid forward on its rails, a bizarre mechanical action that absorbed the recoil. Tommy pulled it back into battery and kept watching. The bullet took 1.4 seconds to cross the valley, dropping nearly 9 feet before impacting. The officer collapsed. Silence. Absolute silence. Then chaos as the Japanese mortar team lost their spotter and their commander. Sergeant Harding stood slowly, his mouth open. He looked at the impossible distance, then back at the skinny kid with the glass pipe. The mockery evaporated. It was replaced by something close to fear. Not fear of Tommy, but fear of what Tommy represented. The idea that death could be calculated like a trigonometry problem. 3 minutes later, a Japanese NCO crawled up to check on the officer. Tommy was already pre-aimed at the exact spot. When the helmet appeared, he just squeezed the trigger. 2 shots, 2 kills, both at half a mile. This time, Harding scrambled over and positioned himself beside Tommy like a bodyguard. He offered water, offered gum, offered everything. The college boy with the mail-order toy had just become the most valuable asset in the platoon. For the next hour, Tommy conducted a clinic in long-range destruction. He targeted machine gun nests at 600 yards, sniper hides at 500 yards, mortar positions at 700 yards. The Unertal scope, with its absurd length and fragile mounts, was proving perfect for the static warfare of Peleliu. But the Japanese were not stupid. They realized what was happening. The random deaths were not random. They were being picked apart by a single shooter. They stopped showing themselves. They adapted. But adaptation meant hesitation. Hesitation meant slower responses. Slower responses meant fewer American deaths. Tommy had changed the mathematics of the battlefield. Officers who once stood confidently at 800 yards now stayed deep in caves. Mortar teams that once fired with impunity now second-guessed every position. By the end of September 15th, Tommy had 8 confirmed kills. By September 20th, he had 23. The Marines started calling him the Calculator. The Japanese called him Akuma no Megame, the devil with glasses. And then the real test came. On September 22nd, 2 Type 95 Japanese light tanks rolled toward the Marine lines. The bazookas were out of ammunition. Anti-tank guns were buried under rubble. Infantry rifles were useless against armor. The tanks were 400 yards away and closing fast. Their 37mm main guns swiveled, searching for targets. Machine guns sprayed the trenches. Marines died. And Tommy Reeves, the college dropout from Michigan, the man with a mail-order toy, made a decision that should have been impossible. He aimed at the tank commander standing exposed in the turret hatch, at a moving target, at 300 yards, and he pulled the trigger. The bullet struck the commander in the helmet. The man disappeared into the turret. The tank swerved violently and crashed into a limestone wall. The engine died. 1 tank disabled. But the second tank kept coming, buttoned up tight, impenetrable. Tommy scanned desperately. Then he saw it. The gunner's optic, a small glass circle the size of a teacup saucer. He aimed. He fired. White dust puffed. Glass shattered. The turret froze. Blind. Marines swarmed the disabled tank with satchel charges. Explosion. Silence. Tommy had just killed 2 tanks with a bolt-action rifle from the First World War. The impossible had become routine. But the story of how Tommy Reeves and his ridiculous glass pipe would revolutionize American warfare was only beginning. Because what happened next would prove that sometimes the craziest ideas, the ones that get laughed at and mocked and called insane, are exactly the ideas that save thousands of lives and change the course of history. Tommy Reeves had just done the impossible. He killed a Japanese general at 800 yards and disabled 2 tanks with a bolt-action rifle that his sergeant had called a mail-order toy. 8 confirmed kills in 1 day. 23 in 5 days. The fragile glass pipe was saving American lives. But convincing the Marine Corps brass to adopt this insane idea across the entire Pacific Theater? That would require a different kind of battle. On September 25, 1944, Colonel Robert Henderson reviewed casualty reports from Peleliu and saw a disturbing pattern. Officer casualties among Japanese forces had spiked 340% in 1 week. Enemy indirect fire accuracy had dropped by half. Something was happening in the Umerbrogel pocket that did not fit standard warfare models. And when Henderson discovered the cause was a single corporal with a privately purchased telescope, his reaction was immediate and violent. This stops now. The meeting happened in a sweltering tent that served as battalion headquarters. Colonel Henderson was 52 years old, a veteran of the First World War who believed in doctrine, discipline, and the superiority of volume fire over precision. He stood behind a folding table covered with maps and reports, his face red with heat and anger. Sergeant Harding had brought Tommy to explain the situation. The colonel did not offer them seats. "Corporal Reeves," Henderson began, his voice cold. "You have violated Marine Corps equipment regulations by modifying a service weapon with unauthorized optics. You have endangered yourself and your unit by operating outside standard tactics. And you have created a logistics nightmare because now every green lieutenant wants his own pet sniper with a toy scope. Tommy stood at attention, saying nothing. Henderson continued. The Marine Corps does not fight wars with individual heroics. We fight with coordinated fire and maneuver. Your little experiment ends today. You will remove that scope, return to standard issue equipment, and never modify a service weapon again. Is that understood? Sir, Sergeant Harding interrupted, Corporal Reeves has killed 31 confirmed enemy combatants in 9 days. He has eliminated 3 officers, destroyed 2 tanks, and neutralized 4 machine gun positions that were killing Marines every hour. The math works. I do not care about your math, Sergeant. Henderson slammed his hand on the table. What happens when Corporal Reeves takes a bullet, and that expensive scope is buried in the coral? What happens when every marksman in the Corps demands custom equipment we cannot supply? What happens when this precision nonsense fails in a bonsai charge and good Marines die because they trusted gadgets instead of guts? The answer is no. This conversation is over. But the conversation was not over, because sitting in the corner of that tent, saying nothing, was Captain James Mitchell, a 34-year-old intelligence officer who had been quietly studying Tommy's kill reports for 3 days. Mitchell had graduated from MIT before the war. He understood statistics, and the statistics were undeniable. Mitchell stood up. Sir, may I speak? Henderson glared at him. Make it quick, Captain. What if I told you that Corporal Reeves has killed more enemy officers in 9 days than an entire infantry battalion killed in the previous month? What if I showed you data proving that Japanese indirect fire effectiveness drops 60% in sectors where Reeves operates? What if we could replicate this effect across the Pacific and save thousands of American lives? Henderson crossed his arms. I would say you are speculating. I am calculating, sir. Mitchell pulled out a folder filled with charts. Before Reeves started using that scope, our casualty rate from enemy artillery and mortar fire was 23% of total losses. In his sector, it is now 9%. That is a 60% reduction from 1 rifle. Imagine if we had 10, 20, 50. The colonel stared at the numbers. His jaw tightened. You want me to authorize mass production of custom scopes based on 9 days of data from 1 corporal? No, sir. I want you to authorize a formal test. Give us 1 week. Let Reeves demonstrate this system to a team of observers under controlled conditions. If it fails, we bury it. If it succeeds, we train specialists and deploy them before Okinawa. Henderson looked at Tommy for the long moment. What makes you think you can teach this to other Marines? Sir, Tommy spoke for the first time, it is just math. Anyone who passed high school trigonometry can do the calculations. The rifle does not care if you are brave. It only cares if you did the arithmetic correctly. Henderson almost smiled. Almost. You have 3 days to prepare, Corporal. The test will be on September 29th at the firing range behind the airfield. You will engage targets at ranges from 600 to 1,000 yards. You will do this in front of division staff, including General Rupertus. If you miss even once, this experiment dies, and you go back to being a regular rifleman. Understood? Yes, sir. But what Tommy and Mitchell did not know was that Colonel Henderson had already sent a classified report to Marine Corps headquarters recommending the court-martial of any Marine who modified standard-issue weapons. The test was not designed to prove Tommy right. It was designed to humiliate him in front of witnesses and kill the idea permanently. September 29th arrived with brutal heat and 0 cloud cover. The makeshift firing range was a stretch of cleared coral facing a series of ridges where engineers had set up man-sized targets at precisely measured distances. 67 officers gathered in the observation area, including General Rupertus, who commanded the entire Peleliu operation. They stood in whatever shade they could find, skeptical, impatient, waiting for the college boy to fail. Tommy set up his rifle on sandbags, while Captain Mitchell explained the test parameters. 6 targets at 6 ranges: 600, 700, 800, 900, 950, and 1,000 yards. Each target would be exposed for 30 seconds. 1 shot per target. Pass rate was 80%, 5 hits out of 6. Colonel Henderson stood beside the general, arms crossed, confident this would end badly. Tommy checked the scope mounts, wiped dust from the lenses, and pulled out his notebook. He calculated each shot in advance, writing numbers on his left forearm. Temperature, 97 degrees. Humidity, 78%. Wind, quartering from the southeast at 9 miles per hour, gusting to 12. He adjusted for all of it. The first target appeared at 600 yards. Tommy settled behind the rifle, dialed in the elevation, corrected for wind. He exhaled and fired. The recoil slide kicked back. Through the scope, he saw the target snap backward. Hit. Murmurs from the observation area. 1 down. The second target at 700 yards. More elevation. Slightly more windage. Fire. Hit. The murmurs got louder. At 800 yards, Tommy took extra time. This was the distance that had started everything, the range where the Japanese general had stood. He squeezed the trigger. The bullet took 1.4 seconds to arrive. Hit. 3 for 3. General Rupertus leaned toward Henderson. "That is impressive shooting, Colonel." Henderson said nothing. His face had gone pale. The fourth target at 900 yards appeared, and Tommy wrote new numbers on his arm. This required aiming nearly 20 feet above the target. He was shooting at sky. Fire. The slide kicked. Tommy watched through the glass as the bullet arced down and punched through the target's chest. Hit. 4 for 4. The observation area went silent. Officers who had been chatting and joking now stared through binoculars, trying to understand what they were seeing. The fifth target, at 950 yards, was positioned on a slight uphill angle, adding complexity. Tommy calculated the additional elevation required for the slope. He adjusted the scope. Fired. Hit. 5 for 5. He had already passed the test, but one target remained. The final target, at 1,000 yards, the absolute maximum effective range listed in the manual, appeared behind a heat shimmer that made it waver like a mirage. This was the shot designed to break him. Tommy stared through the scope at a target he could barely see. The heat waves distorted everything. The wind had shifted, now gusting unpredictably. He would need to aim approximately 25 feet above the target, lobbing the bullet into the air and trusting math he could not verify. He thought about his father. Patience beats firepower. He made the final calculations, held his breath, squeezed. The rifle kicked, the slide returned. Tommy watched. 2 full seconds passed. The bullet hung in the air, dropping, dropping. Then the target at 1,000 yards jerked backward and fell. Hit. 6 for 6. Perfect score. The observation area erupted. Officers shouted. General Rupertus actually laughed, a sound of pure disbelief. He turned to Henderson. "Colonel, I believe we just witnessed the future of Marine Corps marksmanship." Henderson stood frozen. The test he designed to humiliate Tommy had just proven him spectacularly right. Captain Mitchell seized the moment. "Sir, with your permission, I would like to establish a scout sniper training program. We select marksmen from each division, train them in these techniques, equip them with scoped rifles, and deploy them before Iwo Jima." The general nodded immediately. "Approved. Captain, you have carte blanche. Get me 50 trained snipers within 8 weeks. Henderson, you will provide full logistics support." Colonel Henderson opened his mouth to protest, but the general cut him off. "That is an order, Colonel." By October 15, 1944, the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School officially opened at Quantico. Tommy Reeves, now promoted to sergeant, became the lead instructor. The first class had 43 students. They came from infantry battalions across the Pacific, chosen not for their shooting skills, but for their ability to do mathematics under pressure. Tommy taught them the same lessons his father had taught him. The rifle does not care about courage. It cares about calculations. Wind speed, distance, temperature, humidity, angle. Do the math. Trust the glass. Within 6 weeks, the first trained snipers deployed to Iwo Jima, carrying Springfield 1903 rifles with Unreachable 8-power scopes. The results were immediate and devastating. Japanese officers who once directed artillery from safe distances started dying at ranges they thought impossible. Enemy morale cracked. Indirect fire became random and ineffective. But success brought attention, and attention brought danger. On November 3, 1944, a Japanese intelligence officer on Luzon intercepted a radio transmission mentioning the new American Akuma no Magane units. The Devil with Glasses program was no longer a secret. Imperial headquarters in Tokyo issued orders to all Pacific commands. Priority Alpha. Locate and eliminate American long-range shooters. Capture their equipment. Reverse engineer their tactics. Counter-sniper teams formed. Japanese marksmen equipped with captured American scopes began hunting the hunters. And on November 18th, during a training exercise at Quantico, Captain Mitchell received a classified intelligence report that made his blood run cold. The Japanese were not just hunting American snipers. They were hunting the man who created them. Tommy Reeves had a price on his head. 10,000 yen. Enough money to retire. Every Japanese soldier in the Pacific now knew his face, his name, and his last known location. The Marine Corps immediately ordered Tommy transferred to a safe stateside position, far from combat. But Tommy refused. "Sir," he told Mitchell, "I taught those men. If the Japanese are hunting them, I need to be there." "You will die, Tommy." The colonel was right about one thing. Individual heroics do not win wars. "Maybe not, sir, but somebody has to teach the next generation of calculators." And the war just became personal. Tommy Reeves had turned a mail-order toy into a weapon that killed Japanese generals at 800 yards. The Marine Corps created a scout sniper program. 50 trained marksmen deployed across the Pacific with Springfield rifles and Unreachable scopes. Enemy officer casualties spiked 340%. Indirect fire accuracy collapsed. But success bred attention. On November 18, 1944, Imperial Japanese headquarters issued Priority Alpha orders. Hunt the devil with glasses. Tommy Reeves had a 10,000 yen bounty on his head. Every Japanese soldier knew his face. And now, the real war began. Because when you prove that mathematics can kill at impossible distances, the enemy stops laughing and starts shooting back. The intercepted radio transmission reached Tokyo on November 20th. Japanese intelligence officers gathered in a concrete bunker beneath the Imperial General Staff Building, studying reports that made no tactical sense. American sniper teams were eliminating Japanese officers at ranges exceeding 800 meters. Standard counter-sniper doctrine failed. Japanese marksmen positioned at 600 meters were dying before they could acquire targets. Major Takeshi Yamamoto, head of tactical intelligence, spread photographs across the conference table. These images came from captured American positions. They showed the unreachable scope, the modified Springfield, the training manuals. "We are not fighting individual shooters," Yamamoto said. "We are fighting a system, a mathematical system. The Americans have weaponized precision." General Kuribayashi, commander of Iwo Jima defenses, studied the photos. "How many of these devil units exist?" Intelligence estimates 50 trained teams deployed. Officer casualties have increased 470% in sectors where they operate. Our artillery spotters refuse to expose themselves. Fire mission coordination has collapsed. Kuribayashi slammed his fist on the table. "Then we adapt. Deploy counter-sniper teams with captured American optics. Establish 1,000-meter security zones around all command posts. Officers will direct operations from covered positions only. And find this Tommy Reeves. Kill him publicly. Break their program." Within 3 weeks, Japanese counter-sniper doctrine changed completely. Officers stopped standing on ridges. Forward observers operated from deep bunkers with periscopes. Artillery coordination shifted to nighttime operations when American scopes were useless. Japanese casualties from long-range rifle fire dropped 60%. The mathematical advantage Tommy had created was eroding. But adaptation came with a cost. Japanese indirect fire effectiveness plummeted. Without visual spotting, mortar teams fired blind. Artillery wasted ammunition on empty positions. American casualties from indirect fire dropped 41% across the Pacific. Tommy's glass pipe had fundamentally altered how Japan fought the war. But the program faced a crisis nobody predicted. On December 3, 1944, during operations on Leyte, Sergeant Bill Morrison from Tommy's first training class took position in a jungle hide at dawn. The humidity was 96%. Morning fog hung like wet cotton. Morrison settled behind his scoped Springfield and looked through the unreachable optic. The lens was completely fogged. He wiped it. The moisture returned in seconds. He tried breathing on it to clear the condensation. Nothing worked. At 06:47 hours, a Japanese machine gun team set up 700 yards away, clearly visible to the naked eye, but invisible through the fogged scope. Morrison attempted a shot using Kentucky windage and iron sights. He missed. The machine gun opened fire on a Marine platoon. 17 men died. Morrison was killed by return fire 10 minutes later. The after-action report reached Quantico on December 8th. Captain Mitchell read it 3 times before showing it to Tommy. The problem was environmental. The unreachable scope was designed for target shooting in controlled conditions. In Pacific jungles with 90+% humidity and radical temperature swings between night and day, the sealed optics fogged internally. Once moisture got inside the tube, it could not escape. The scope became a useless steel pipe. "We have lost 4 snipers to fogged optics," Mitchell said. 2 more reported degraded visibility. The program is failing in jungle environments. Henderson was right. These scopes are too fragile. Tommy stared at the report. His hands shook. 17 Marines dead because he had promised a solution that did not work everywhere. "Sir, give me 2 weeks. I can fix this." Mitchell shook his head. "We do not have 2 weeks. Iwo Jima launches in February. If the scopes fail there, the core will kill the program, and you know it. Tommy worked 18-hour days in the Quantico workshop. He disassembled inertial scopes, studying the sealing mechanisms. He discovered the problem. The scope tubes were sealed with wax-based compounds that degraded in tropical heat. Moisture seeped in through microscopic gaps. He experimented with rubber O-rings, automotive gaskets, even submarine hatch seals. Nothing worked perfectly. Then a young corporal suggested something insane. "Sir, what if we just drill a tiny vent hole? Let the moisture equalize instead of fighting it." Tommy calculated. A 1 mm hole at the objective end would allow air circulation without affecting the optics. He drilled the modification into 3 scopes and shipped them to Leyte for field testing. The reports came back on December 28th. 0 fogging. Perfect clarity. The vented scopes worked flawlessly in 98% humidity. Problem solved. But the crisis had exposed something dangerous. The program depended entirely on Tommy. If he died, the institutional knowledge died with him, and Japan was actively hunting him. February 19th, 1945, Iwo Jima. The volcanic island rose from the Pacific like a black fist, dominated by Mount Suribachi on the southern tip. Tommy had deployed with 12 scout sniper teams, despite orders to remain stateside. He was not supposed to be there, but his students were landing on those beaches, and he would not abandon them. The Marines hit the black sand at 0900 hours under devastating fire. Japanese defenders, trained in the new counter-sniper doctrine, stayed hidden in bunkers and caves. No officers exposed themselves. No forward observers stood on ridges. The fighting was brutal, close range, bunker to bunker. By February 21st, the Marines had captured Suribachi, but faced a nightmare. The northern highlands were a labyrinth of fortified caves commanded by General Kurabayashi himself. American casualties topped 2,000. Progress measured in yards, cost in lives. Tommy set up on the western slope of Suribachi with Sergeant Harding, now his spotter. They glassed the northern ridges through binoculars. Nothing moved. Kurabayashi had learned. His officers commanded from deep bunkers connected by tunnels. Artillery observers used periscopes from protected positions. There were no targets for a sniper. "We are useless here," Harding said. "This is not Peleliu. Everything is underground." Tommy studied the terrain for hours. Then he saw it. A ventilation shaft on Hill 382, barely visible between 2 boulders. Smoke rising from underground fires meant air circulation, which meant the tunnel system was active, which meant officers were inside, directing the defense. He could not shoot into a bunker, but he could make them come out. Tommy radioed battalion. "Request white phosphorus artillery on grid 628447. Make them think we spotted a headquarters. You want to waste WP rounds on an empty hillside? Trust me, sir." 30 minutes later, white phosphorus shells exploded across Hill 382. The burning chemical poured into every crack and crevice, filling the tunnel system with choking smoke. And then they appeared. Japanese officers and radio operators evacuating through emergency exits, coughing, temporarily blinded. They were 940 yards away. Tommy had 12 scout sniper teams positioned in a semicircle around the hill. He keyed his radio. "All Devil units. Targets emerging grid 628447. Range 900 to 1,000 yards. Wind east-northeast 8 miles per hour. Elevation 30 clicks. Fire at will." 12 rifles spoke within seconds. The Japanese officers never knew what killed them. They evacuated burning tunnels and walked into a mathematical execution. 14 officers died in 90 seconds. The command structure for the entire northern sector collapsed. Japanese defensive coordination disintegrated. Marine infantry pushed forward against disorganized resistance. By February 24th, Hill 382 fell.
American casualties in that sector were 40% lower than projections. The glass pipe had worked again. News of the Iwo Jima sniper operations spread through the Pacific Fleet like electricity. Commanders who had been skeptical now demanded scout sniper teams. The program expanded to 200 trained marksmen by March 1945. Okinawa operations in April saw 47 sniper teams deployed from the first day. Japanese officer casualties reached levels that crippled tactical coordination. Enemy artillery fire became random and ineffective without proper spotting. American casualties from indirect fire dropped to 11% of total losses, compared to 23% in early Pacific battles. The statistics were undeniable. Tommy's mathematical approach to warfare had saved thousands of American lives. War correspondents wrote stories about the Devil with Glasses program. Stars and Stripes published a feature titled "The Rifle That Changed Island Warfare." The articles did not mention Tommy by name, at his insistence, but everyone in the Marine Corps knew. General Rupertus submitted a recommendation for the Medal of Honor. Tommy refused it. "Sir," he told Mitchell, "I did not storm a machine gun nest or throw myself on a grenade. I just taught people to do math before pulling the trigger. The real heroes are the men who died before we figured this out." In Tokyo, Japanese leadership studied the same statistics and reached grim conclusions. American long-range precision fire had neutralized traditional artillery coordination. Officers could not effectively command without exposing themselves to sniper fire. The mathematical warfare the Americans had developed was unbeatable with current doctrine. Kuribayashi, trapped on Iwo Jima, sent a final transmission before his death. "The enemy has learned to kill our brains and leave our body fighting blind. We adapted too slowly. The next war will be decided by those who calculate fastest." The program Tommy created from a mail-order scope and a bolt-action rifle had fundamentally changed naval warfare in the Pacific. From Peleliu to Okinawa, scout snipers eliminated 847 confirmed Japanese officers, disrupted hundreds of artillery missions, and forced complete tactical reorganization. The Marine Corps estimated the sniper program reduced overall casualties by 18% in the final year of the Pacific War. 18% meant 11,000 Marines came home, who statistically should have died. Tommy Reeves, the college dropout from Michigan, had weaponized mathematics and saved an army. But wars end. Heroes go home. Programs become doctrine. And the man who started it all? On August 15, 1945, when Japan surrendered and the Pacific War ended, Tommy Reeves sat in a Quantico classroom, teaching ballistics to young Marines who would never see combat. He was 23 years old. He looked 45. The Silver Star recommendation sat on Mitchell's desk, still unsigned at Tommy's request. The Marine Corps wanted to make him a legend. Tommy wanted to disappear. What happened to the man who proved that math could kill at 800 yards? What happened when the shooting stopped and the calculators came home? That story, the final chapter, is the one nobody talks about. Because the cost of weaponizing mathematics was not paid on the battlefield. It was paid in a quiet house in Michigan, in nightmares that numbers could not solve, in a brilliant mind that could calculate death, but could not calculate peace. And that story begins after the war ends. From a mail-order toy mocked by his sergeant to a weapon that killed 847 Japanese officers and saved 11,000 American lives, Tommy Reeves had turned mathematics into salvation. The Scout Sniper program changed Pacific warfare. Enemy coordination collapsed. American casualties dropped 18%. But when the guns fell silent on August 15, 1945, and Japan surrendered, the hardest question remained unanswered. What happens to a man who weaponized mathematics when the war that needed him ends? What happens when a 23-year-old calculator comes home with nightmares that numbers cannot solve? This story has one final twist nobody saw coming. Because the cost of genius is not always paid on the battlefield. Sometimes it is paid in silence, in a quiet house in Michigan, in the space between who you were and who you had to become. And the price Tommy Reeves paid was higher than anyone knew. December 1945. Tommy returned to Hickory Corners, Michigan, wearing dress blues with a silver star he never wanted. The town threw a parade. The mayor made speeches about heroism and sacrifice. Someone asked Tommy to describe killing Japanese soldiers for the local newspaper. He excused himself, walked to his father's grave, and did not speak for 3 days. Sarah Donovan found him there on the 4th day, sitting in snow beside the headstone. She had known Tommy since high school, before the war, before the calculations, when he was just a quiet boy who loved mathematics and deer hunting. She sat beside him without speaking. After an hour, Tommy finally broke the silence. "I finished the math, Dad. I used the glass just like you said, but I cannot stop calculating. I see windows and automatically measure range. I hear cars backfire and calculate trajectory. The numbers have faces now, and I cannot make them stop." Sarah took his hand. "Then stop trying to stop them. Let the numbers exist. You will learn to live with them." They married in spring 1946. Tommy enrolled at University of Michigan to study mathematics, but lasted 1 semester. Too many windows, too many angles, too many sight lines his mind automatically calculated without permission. He quit and took a job at the lumber mill where his father had worked, cutting timber, operating saws, manual labor that exhausted his body and silenced the arithmetic that haunted his mind. At night, Sarah held him through nightmares where Japanese officers fell in slow motion and ballistics equations wrote themselves in blood. She never asked him to explain. She just held him and whispered that he was home. He was safe. The war was over. But Tommy knew the war would never be over. Not really. Not for him. 4 children came. 2 boys, 2 girls. Tommy taught them mathematics at the kitchen table with infinite patience. But he never took them hunting. When they asked why, he said he had done enough shooting for 1 lifetime. His eldest son found the silver star in a drawer when he was 12 and asked what it meant. Tommy told him it meant 17 Marines died because a scope fogged in the jungle, and he had promised a solution that failed. The boy did not understand. Tommy never explained further. The years passed quietly. Korea came. Vietnam. Tommy watched young men with scoped rifles on television news and recognized his own legacy playing out in distant jungles. The technology had improved. The scopes no longer fogged. The rifles were semi-automatic. But the mathematics remained identical. Gravity did not change. Wind still drifted. The calculations his father taught him in Michigan woods had become doctrine in every military on Earth. The Scout Sniper program Tommy created did not end with World War II. It evolved into something far larger than one man with a mail-order scope. By 1953, the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School at Quantico
had trained 847 marksmen. The Korean War saw these teams deployed from day one. Chinese and North Korean officer casualties in the first year exceeded 2,300 confirmed kills. Enemy artillery coordination collapsed in sectors where American snipers operated. The statistical impact was devastating. Communist forces lost 43% of their forward observer capability within 6 months.
Vietnam expanded the program further. By 1968, the Marine Corps fielded 412 active sniper teams. The lessons Tommy taught about patience, mathematics, and precision shooting became foundational doctrine. One of his students, Sergeant Carlos Hathcock, would become the most famous American sniper in history, with 93 confirmed kills in Vietnam, using the same mathematical principles Tommy had pioneered on Peleliu. But the influence spread beyond American forces. The British SAS studied Tommy's training manuals and created their own sniper program in 1952. The Soviet Union captured American scopes in Korea and reverse-engineered the technology, establishing sniper schools across the Warsaw Pact by 1956. Israel, facing constant threats on multiple borders, adopted the mathematical approach to long-range shooting and built one of the world's most effective sniper programs. The glass pipe that Sergeant Harding had mocked in 1944 became the standard for military precision worldwide. Modern estimates suggest that Scout sniper programs directly descended from Tommy's work have been responsible for over 47,000 confirmed enemy combatant deaths across 70 years of conflicts. More importantly, the precision fire capability reduced collateral damage and civilian casualties by providing alternatives to artillery and airstrikes. The United States Institute of Peace estimated in 2015 that sniper programs saved approximately 230,000 civilian lives by eliminating the need for area bombardment in urban combat zones from Vietnam through Iraq and Afghanistan. The technology evolved dramatically. Modern scopes use computerized ballistics calculators, laser rangefinders, and thermal imaging. The rifles are purpose-built precision instruments, not modified First World War relics. But the fundamental mathematics Tommy wrote on his forearm in 1944 remains unchanged. Distance times gravity constant divided by velocity squared equals bullet drop. Wind speed times time of flight equals drift. Every sniper from every nation still solves the same equations Tommy solved with a pencil stub and a water-stained notebook. The principle he proved on a coral ridge in the Pacific endures. Mathematics defeats chaos. Precision saves lives. Calculation conquers distance. But the legacy extends beyond military applications into an unexpected realm. The mathematical approach to long-range shooting that Tommy pioneered influenced civilian competitive shooting sports. The Precision Rifle Series, established in 2012, uses the exact same ballistics calculations Tommy taught at Quantico. Thousands of civilian shooters now compete using skills derived directly from wartime sniper training. The technology transfer worked both ways. Advances in civilian optics manufacturing improved military equipment quality. The relationship between military and civilian precision shooting created a feedback loop of innovation that continues today. Yet the deeper lesson transcends technology entirely. Tommy Reeves proved that transformative innovation can come from anywhere. He was not a general or a weapons designer. He was a 20-year-old college dropout with a mail-order catalog and a dead father's rifle. The Marine Corps establishment called his idea insane. Officers laughed at the glass pipe, but Tommy understood something the institution did not. That doctrine should serve reality, not the other way around. That the willingness to be mocked matters more than the fear of failure. That sometimes the craziest idea is the only one that works.
History is filled with similar examples. In 1940, a British metallurgist named Barnes Wallis proposed skipping bombs across water to destroy German dams. The Air Ministry called it ridiculous. Operation Chastise proved them catastrophically wrong. In 1942, a Navy engineer named Luis Alvarez suggested using radar to guide bombs. The establishment said it was impossible. Precision-guided munitions now decide modern wars. The pattern repeats endlessly. Institutional resistance, individual persistence, transformative success. The lesson applies far beyond military history. Every major innovation in business, science, and society faces the same wall of skepticism that Tommy faced in that command tent with Colonel Henderson. The people who change the world are not the ones who wait for permission. They are the ones who do the math, trust the glass, and take the shot despite the mockery. They are the calculators who prove that courage and precision can coexist. But there is one final detail about Tommy's story that almost nobody knows. A detail that only emerged in 2019 when the Marine Corps Historical Division declassified documents related to World War II equipment modifications. The universal scope that Tommy used on Peleliu, serial number 3928471, was not actually Marine Corps property. It was his personal scope, purchased with his own money, mounted without official authorization. Technically, Tommy violated regulations every single time he fired that rifle in combat. The Marine Corps never officially approved the modification until after the successful demonstration at Quantico on September 29, 1944. Which means every kill before that date, including the Japanese general at 800 yards, the 2 tanks, the officers on Hill 382 at Iwo Jima, all of it happened using equipment that was against regulations. Tommy Reeves changed the course of the Pacific War with a piece of unauthorized gear he bought from a mail-order catalog. The irony is almost beautiful. The innovation that saved 11,000 American lives and became standard doctrine for 70 years began as a regulation violation by a corporal who decided the math mattered more than the manual. When Tommy died in 1998, the Marine Corps sent an honor guard to his funeral. They presented Sarah with a folded flag and thanked her for her husband's service. They did not mention that his greatest contribution to the Corps technically violated Article 108 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The rifle, scope number 3928471, now sits in a display case at the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Triangle, Virginia. The placard describes it as experimental precision equipment that changed naval warfare in the Pacific. It does not mention that the experiment was unauthorized. Most visitors walk past without stopping. They want to see tanks and flamethrowers. They do not realize they are looking at the weapon that proved mathematics could defeat an empire. From a lumber mill worker's son with a dead father's rifle and an $88 mail-order scope, to a program that saved 11,000 American lives in World War II and influenced 47,000 enemy combatant eliminations across 7 decades of global conflict. Tommy Reeves proved that innovation requires courage more than credentials. That the willingness to be mocked matters infinitely more than the need to be approved. That sometimes the most insane idea is the only rational answer. He turned a glass pipe into precision. He turned mathematics into mercy for the men who fought beside him. And he did it by trusting that the numbers would not lie, even when everyone else did not believe. The Marine Corps Scout Sniper Program graduates approximately 300 students per year. Every one of them learns ballistics calculations Tommy wrote on his forearm in 1944. Every one carries forward a legacy that began with a corporal who looked at an 800-yard problem and decided the manual was wrong. That is the power of calculated courage. That is what happens when mathematics meets the willingness to prove everyone wrong. And that is why the mail-order toy that Sergeant Harding mocked became the weapon that changed warfare forever. Because Tommy Reeves understood something profound. The rifle does not care about courage, but courage decides whether you trust the rifle. Do the math. Trust the glass. Take the shot. The rest is history.